Hi, my name is Claudia Russell, and this is my Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 reflection. So, in Chapter 1, I learned kind of just the main definition of public speaking. That public speaking is when you are speaking with an audience, that you could be in a park, giving a sermon, whatever you want to do, but if there's not an audience there, that is not public speaking. I also learned about intersectional standpoint. So our intersectional standpoint is different for every single person. There are so many things that make this up: your gender, your race, your religion, disability, language, all these different things, and they form our social location. And when you know your standpoint, you know where you're speaking from. And this gives us our unique strengths and weaknesses as a public speaker. So I also learned about our speaking situation, which this is a set of resources that we have available to build our speech. So this is our speaker, our audience, our context, and our purpose. And these are all different based on where you're speaking, when you're speaking, and there's so many parts to learn. That way you can adequately speak and give a speech to the audience and to the context that you are talking to. The most kind of interesting thing that I learned in this was your intersectional standpoint, because I was able to think about who I am and how that affects my public speaking. I found it really cool because there's so many different parts that make this up. And some of the examples it was giving in the textbook, each and every single one of us is different, and we all have a different standpoint that we are giving our speeches from. So kind of the application in this, I really took away was the analyzing your public speaking situation section. And it gave 3 main points, all of which I am excited to use as I'm preparing speeches for the future. So that's identify the fixed factors, and this is kind of the foundations of your speech. So what are your purpose, who's your context, and really kind of setting yourself up. Second part was choose your starting point. So choose where you want to go and kind of where you want to base your whole speech off of. And last is elaborate the elements one by one. So this is building off the rest around the foundation and around your starting point. So next I'm going to move on to Chapter 2. So kind of the biggest thing that I learned in Chapter 2 was the inverted U model. And this honestly, I think, is one of the more interesting things I found also. But the inverted U model is where peak performance levels occur kind of at a mid-range of anxiety. And while the lower levels of anxiety and extreme levels of anxiety produce a lesser than performance. I found this interesting because this is something that I have seen in my own life. The main thing that I wrote kind of down for the interesting section was understanding what type of anxiety I have. I personally believe that I have the behavioral anxiety that I was talking about. I talked about cognitive and affective. This is because the main thing I do when I'm speaking in public is I shake my knee because I'm nervous. And so that's kind of the one thing, when you see me shaking my knee, you're like, oh, she's a little nervous right now. And so that's something that I enjoyed. But I also really enjoyed learning the strategies of how to manage these. For behavioral, kind of reducing your environmental stress, seeking support, and preparing and practicing. And so I very much see myself in this behavioral aspect. All 3 of these things are things that I already do and I'm going to continue to do. In my takeaway question assignment, I mentioned how when I'm about to give a speech at my youth group, I go and I sit in the back, so I reduce my environmental stress. I seek support from my youth director, and then I prepare and practice. And sometimes that's a week and a half, a week before, but then also right before I go on. And so these are already things that I'm doing to combat that behavioral anxiety that I have. I also kind of learned a lot about this personal model of resilience. It's the set of strengths and strategies that an individual uses to face and manage events. And these are the tools that we use to succeed. And so that's one of the main things that I kind of am going to use as an application, is to continue to build my toolbox of tools, of things that are going to help me manage stress, manage life events, manage anxiety when I'm going to public speak. So thank you so much. These were kind of all the things that I learned from chapter 1 and chapter 2. I think that this is going to help me a lot going into the rest of these speeches. I think that kind of learning my strengths and my weaknesses from chapter 1 and my standpoint will help me when kind of managing my anxiety going into chapter 2 and going into the rest of this semester. So thank you so much.